Hello everyone, my name is Tim Sheehan and I'm the editor of the Brewers Journal. It's a great honour and privilege today to be joined by my good friend John Keeling. How are you, John?
I'm good, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, John, as I said to you, multiple times in the past, it's a real honour and a privilege to someone that really helped shape my journey in beer, journey in brewing, and appreciation of what I do for a living now. From an early point to have you, as a regular part of what we do in the events, in the magazine. So really, since day one of the magazine, we were visiting Fuller's. I think that was the second ever visit we did, May or June 2015. And I remember popping up to your office several days before. I'd been to see Logan Plant, founder of Beavertown. And we had a great chat, great visit, obviously two very different breweries, Fuller's and Beavertown. And I said, Logan, I'm actually really nervous about going to meet John because I've grown up in West London. I've drunk Fuller's, London Pride, ESB. At that point, Discovery was a new beer, or relatively new in my sort of formative days of drinking great cask beer and keg beer. And he goes, don't worry, Tim, just talk about Man United. And we were down the Hock Cellar doing a tasting with one of the great tour guides. And I got a word said, oh, John will see you now. And I popped upstairs. And first thing I said is, looking forward to the game tomorrow. And his look was just like, what the hell are you talking about? And I was like, yeah, cheers, Logan. That was my in. That was going to be the sort of softly. But
didn't work.
It didn't work. I mean,
they probably just lost the game or something.
Well, that's the thing. You were playing well.
Oh,
and
right.
I thought this was just like, you go like putty in my hands.
Yeah.
But no, so obviously you retired from Fuller's as brewing director.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did you miss the day to day?
No, not really. I'm glad I'm retired. I think it's you just move on, when life changes. I'm still involved in the world of beer to the level I quite like, and we do lots of other things as well. So getting traveling, just having time to spend doing what you want to do. And it's also good not having a boss. Yeah. I mean, as brewing director, did you consider yourself a boss? Well, I was in charge of brewing, yes, but then I report to the managing director. And I think sometimes they agree with you, sometimes they don't. So I think it's a difficult thing because the higher you get up, the more it involves money. And it's not just a matter of just doing your job and whatever, but it's what are the profits of the company. And I always found that, the most tedious part of doing the job.
But you've often spoke about the fine balance between the brewing and production side and the sales and marketing.
Yes.
And I imagine in this day and age, it's we've still got an incredible amount of breweries here in the UK and further afield, but it's obviously a tough climate now. I imagine and that's a fine line to tread between making the product you want and making the product that sells.
Yeah, but I think, but if you review it as a team of people, so you have sales, marketing, brewing, production, operations, all involved, then you're all pulling in the same way. The biggest problems occur when one of those groups has an idea on their own and are determined to make it work. So they then tell the other teams, this is how we want you to do this. And that never works. I mean, so it's all, I'd learned through my career, the more cooperation you get, the better the end result always turns out to be. So I think when we did Black Cab, and myself and Derek Prentice was then the two people, and we wanted to do Black Cab for a reason, and the reason was we're a London brewery, and London is the home of stout, and stout was originated in London, etc., etc. So we wanted to do this. So we then approached marketing and sales and said, we want to do this. And the initial reaction was, why? Why would we bother ever to do a stout? Dark beers that, Guinness has got the market wrapped up. And then we explained that the origins of stout are actually London. And they got more and more interested in this. And then they said, right, we're going to go away and think about this. And they came back and said, we've thought of a name for the stout. We're going to call it Black Cab Stout. And I thought, well, that's the most perfect name for a London stout. So they really got it, and that's why it worked far better.
Yeah.
And then things happened with it. It's not, we don't make it anymore. It's now coming back. In actual fact, they're going to relaunch it, but it got taken off because of Guinness. Guinness wanted Guinness in Fuller's pubs, so they were willing to make that happen.
But in terms of an example of new product development with everyone being on the same page, that's a 10 out of 10.
Great, yeah. And in many cases, it actually did work so well. It was selling really well, and it was really Guinness who decided that they would do anything to make sure Guinness was in Fuller's pubs.
Say no more. Say no more. I mean, in terms of Black Cab, though, I mean, Fuller's almost, saw the future. We've now got, brilliant London breweries, Anspach and Hop Day, London Black, Hamilton.
Yeah.
Just done a new Nitro Stout, I believe. It's in vogue at the moment.
Yeah, and Brewdog were announcing that they were selling half of what Guinness sells or whatever this morning. So
Is that right?
I don't know whether that's true or not. But I think, Guinness have had the market for a long time, and it's a very famous drink, and it's got huge popularity, and why not? But I think that market might open up a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, were there any other examples of times that alignment between all aspects of Fuller's didn't work as you'd like, I suppose, when it came to maybe new products or relaunches? Or
I mean, I think the main problem when I was at Fuller's, and it still is to some degree, is if you ask the salesman what do they want as a new beer, they perfectly described London Pride, because they just wanted another London Pride.
Yeah.
And so I think initially the ideas have to come out of brewing and marketing to a degree, and then involve sales and finance are another important part of it. But I always found that if you're going to produce a new cask beer, they always wanted it 4% or below, because they reasoned they cannot sell cask beer over 4%. I think that's one of the things craft beer has disproved to a degree, that you can sell stronger beers. If you look back to the 70s and the 80s, lots of beer was below, or most beer was below 4%. I remember when ESB was in the newspapers, in the Sunday papers, as being the strongest bitter, the strongest beer you could buy on draft. And it was far and away the strongest you could buy, and it was only 5.4, 5.5%. But people were saying, "Oh, this is loony juice. You should not be buying this."
I think some people still enjoy it for those factors.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, does it surprise you that beer has stood the test of time so successfully? I mean, obviously not just in the UK, but it's a style, especially in the States, that a lot of brewers and breweries like to, pay homage to and do their own versions.
Well, I think you find, American craft brewing drew a lot of its inspiration from British brewing. And one of the British breweries it did was Fuller's. And the reason Fuller's influenced so many American brewers was, number one, they used to fly over to London, and we're a London brewery. Yeah. And they used to drive past in a black cab, past the brewery on the way into London from Heathrow. So they saw the brewery, they wanted to come visit it, and they saw our pubs in London and drank that beer. You speak to Garrett Oliver, you speak to John Hall at Goose Island, and that's how they were introduced to it. But also the other way American brewers got introduced to it. We were one of the first, if not the first, people to export to America. Yeah. In terms of ale. Or Sam Smith was another one. And we did that through Thames Valley Trading, who was a guy who'd got this idea that British beers would sell well in America. And he took Fuller's and Sam Smith and started selling our beers in 78, I think it was. Wow. And ESB and London Pride were the two beers they chose to go from Fuller's. And so everybody thought ESB was a style of beer, not just the name of a beer.
Yeah.
And that's how it influenced them. And if it hadn't been exported to America, maybe the ESB story might have stopped sooner.
And to this day, the amount of brewers that are fortunate enough to hang out with when they come to England, it's take me to a Fuller's pub.
Yeah, but that's the benefits of being in London.
Yeah.
And London's a great place. I was glad I came to work for it. Fuller's was the only people who ever offered me a job, so I didn't have much choice, but I did come here and I've enjoyed it ever since I've been here.
So obviously, did you ever anticipate or envisage you'd end up as brewing director at a brewery such as Fuller's?
Well, that's a good question. I never thought I'd be a brewing director when I first started off in the brewing industry. But as soon as I started working for Fuller's, I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to be a brewing director here.
And you've, in your fantastic articles that you write for us, each issue, expertly illustrated by our friend Rob Murray, you've talked about your early days in beer. I mean, for the uninitiated, what kind of lit that fire in you to, that enjoying beer and then also going, oh, maybe this is something I could do as a gig?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I started drinking beers because my friends started drinking beer. So we started drinking about 17. So we was a little bit underage. But we used to go into pubs to drink beer. And I think it was, just that social side made me interested in beer. You drank beer in pubs and talked to your friends and enjoyed the crack. And that was what went on, and it was good fun. But then shortly after I started drinking, I left school because I didn't like school. I didn't enjoy being at school. And then my mother said to me I had to get a job, and she found a job for me, which happened to be at the Wilson's Brewery, which was part of the Watney Empire in Newton Heath. So I said, okay, I'll go for the interview. Went for the interview and luckily enough got the job. So I started as a lab technician there. And what was great about Wilson's was the friendships that you found there, and everybody was friendly. Everybody wanted to help you. And it was just a good time. And there was a heck of a lot of drinking going on, I know. I mean, and I was too young. I didn't want to drink in the volumes that some of those people drank. But I used to love going to lunch in the pub, and have a pint and something to eat. And it was always good fun, and the people there were great people to work with. And there's something about the brewing industry that makes it easy. It doesn't matter whether you're working for a company like Watney's, then one of the biggest breweries in Britain, or you're working for a small company like Fuller's, as they were when I joined them, they were the smallest brewery in London. And but one thing I did notice about the big breweries is they were very tiered, so that somebody who left school would find it very difficult to become head brewer. It joined from straight. If you joined from university, you found it much easier to become head brewer. And I didn't quite understand why that should be, but they didn't encourage. They encouraged people up to a certain level, and they made me do day release, for instance, which made me get good qualifications. But there's so many people at my level with HNCs, ONCs who were going no further in the setup. So I thought I would have to leave at the big company in order to progress as a career. So I went to Heriot Watt then, and Watney's to thank them very much, made me get the qualifications to take me to university. And so I went to university, but coming out of university, I did not want to work for another big company because I just thought it's too centred. Like Watney's were very much centred on London, so that if you work for London, you rose to the top quicker. Yep. Than if you worked in Manchester or for Webster's in Yorkshire. Mm-hmm. So I just thought, no, I I don't want to work for somebody who is set up like that. So I didn't want to work for Scottish in Newcastle. I didn't want to work for Guinness. Didn't want to work for Whitbread. I wanted to work for one of the regional companies. And luckily enough, when I was leaving university, Fuller's were looking for a junior brewer. So I applied, and I got the job.
And was it a wrench to move down to London? I mean, you're no stranger to obviously to travel and to living in different parts of the UK.
Well, living in, I would have much preferred to get a job in a local brewery. Then I could have lived at home and whatever. But moving to London was a much bigger range. But they were the only people that offered me a job, and so I had to go. And you just, at that age, you just get on with things.
Yeah.
And so I joined Fuller's in January 81. I'd only ever drank Fuller's once before I worked for Fuller's. I asked it round. I still had some connections at Wilson's, and I still worked in the summer there when I was a student. And I asked the people there, what do you know about Fuller's? Well, I know they're a brewery in London, but I don't know much about anything about their beers. So nobody in Manchester seemed to know anything about Fuller's beers. But the first time I ever drank it was at a Frank Zappa concert. We went to see Frank Zappa at Hammersmith. And then we, beforehand, we went in the bar, and there was an Irish landlord in there, and he said, you want to drink ESB? That's the beer you should drink. Yeah. So we all had 3 pints or 4 pints of ESB before we went to see Frank Zappa. Then we had last orders in the Britannia with him, and he had then just closed the door and said, if you want to stay behind, have a couple more. So we said, okay, fine. So we'd had quite a few ESBs by the time we got somewhere to sleep that night. But my first day at Fuller's, I was with one of the brewers called Jeff Warrington. He said, right, it's time for lunch, John. Do you want to go for a pint? So I said, yeah, okay, I'll go for a pint. And the same Irishman was behind the bar.
Did he remember you?
No, but I remembered him, and I thought, I'm not drinking anything he recommends.
Yeah. Well, you did well to remember him after that many ESBs.
But he was so distinctive.
So you've spoken a lot in our magazine and at our events as well, and previously already today, about the importance of a team and working together. And, it goes without saying, you've worked with some brilliant brewers in your time. Georgina Young, Reg Drury, Derek Prentice, just to name 3. What have you learned from great people like that in your time?
Well, I think one of the things you learn is not everybody is the same. Not everybody thinks the same. And, everybody has different experiences. And I think to get diversity into your team is a good thing. If you're all thinking the same way and doing the same things, so if you're all, been to the same school, done the same things, and you all of the same personality types. And I think one of the things that I find, people are different personalities, different characters. So by and large in a team, you agree on a big chunk of the work and the ideas. But there are sections where you will have disagreements, and that's where that diversity comes in, because they will explain it in a different way and you will see it a different way. And I think that's what you need. And one of the best places to do them sort of think tanks is sometimes after work when you're having a pint. And you learn more about people that way. I always thought that, it was particularly when I was in charge, that it was difficult to make people open up at a meeting, whereas in a pub it is not difficult to make people open up. So I think that was always a good thing. But I think it is literally the biggest thing I learned from teams is make sure you have a diverse team that can bring different things to the table. If you have a team of brewers, all the brewers want to make beer, and we all want to make excellent beer. We all have the same visions and where we want to go, where we want to take things, but we all have a slightly different way on how we should achieve it. And just because you're in charge doesn't mean you know the right route every time for every answer, for every problem.
So, John, obviously you had a great career at Fuller's. The industry obviously changed a lot in that time, and it's probably changed a great deal since you left Fuller's as well. I mean, what are your main sort of observations and takeaways in that period, I suppose?
Firstly, nothing ever stands still. So don't expect it to stand still. I remember thinking when IPA was taking off, which marketing guru spotted that? None of them. Their idea of innovation was changing the colour on the label, you know, and to get IPA to come out of left field somewhere, they did not think about that. So things will always change. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but change is always going to happen. Nothing, no matter how. See, who thought Fuller's was going to be sold?
Yeah.
Successful company going on, but who thought it was going to be sold? But that's because the environment. When I joined Fuller's, as I've said before, they were the smallest brewery in London. When I left them, they were the biggest brewery in London, and it's amazing to see how people's attitude has changed.
Yeah.
To that, in that we were the darlings of camera. Everybody liked Fuller's. Everybody thought Fuller's was great. But then we got too big. Lots of small brewers were saying, "Oh, you're far too big." And I'm thinking to myself, well, we're making 200,000 barrels of beer. They're making 100 barrels of beer. But Coors UK are making 7 million barrels of beer. I'm saying we're closer to the man making beer in his kitchen than we are to Coors UK. And people did not understand that. They just thought as the next tier up is the problem, not the tier after them or the tier after them. It's always the next tier up. It's always the ones you want to be. Yeah. Right, that are the problem. And that's not always the case. So I would have arguments at Fuller's about how we dealt with craft. And it was really interesting that there was some people on the board who said, no, you've got to keep them at arm's length, John. Why should you help them? Why should you tell them things? Keep them at arm's length. Well, brewers have always talked amongst themselves, and they're always wanting to help. If you have a problem with diacetyl at your brewery, if you speak to me, I'll tell you how I would solve that problem. I wouldn't say, oh, tough luck. And then, because I think, the brewers have never been like that. And so I thought it was always natural that we would find collaboration and coordination with smaller brewers. And I still think to this day that if the family brewers and the independent brewers and the small brewers all got together, it's a much more powerful voice than if you approach it as an individual group. Seba, when they got together with small brewers and got small brewers duty relief through, was again something that was completely left field. It was never going to happen. You couldn't do it, but then Gordon Brown said yes. So I don't understand why Camera and Seba can't fight on these left-wing issues, because fighting on something to get a penny off a pint is going to make no difference whatsoever. It's no difference to small brewers. I also think as well that the playing field always favours the bigger company. Doesn't matter whether it's a pub company or a big brewery, because the playing field does favour them. And I think it will take government intervention to change the playing field to give the smaller person a better chance. And the problem is the medium-sized brewers and the big breweries think if you give the small brewers a chance, you should give us the same chance. And that's not the case. No. You get a lot of advantages through size. But yes, the medium-sized brewers can fall in between the two ends. So I think the government needs to take a long, hard look at how hospitality is run, how brewing is run, etc. Because I think so much favours the big company. And those big companies are no longer British.
And what about the young, smaller breweries now that have opened up in recent years. I mean, goes without saying, it's a tough climate to be in at the moment.
I think it is tough. It's tough to make money, and I think that's because the margins on beer are so small, and the margins tend to go to the retail end rather than the brewing end more than anything. And I think that's why, you know, craft beer does have a larger margin, because you can actually get a decent price for the pint. And I think margins are so important. You've got to always look at what your margin is, how much money you're making per pint.
And what advice do you have for breweries that are plying their trade at the moment? Because obviously, with perfect storm, as people like to call it, of, you know, rising utility bills and the like, it's not easy. You know, we're thankfully seeing new breweries opening, but obviously at nowhere near the rate that we had in previous years. I
think my advice to any brewery is be aware where your beer is being sold. Look at the retail end of your business. And my advice is, it's always better to be selling 120% of your capacity rather than having 200% and selling 100%, selling half, sorry.
Yeah.
It's always better to be looking for how you're going to fit brews in, how are you going to make more beer, how are you going to do this, than it is to say, how are we going to try and sell more because the plant is not running.
And it seems at the moment that really, if you can and you're able, having that tap room, the ability to sell direct it's
that's
imperative.
Being in control of your retail,
of course.
And you know, I mean, the tap room is absolutely essential. I mean, that's been proven in America. And the thing is, you don't just have to have one tap room.
No.
You can have several tap rooms, and representing your brewery. And I think what you have to do is make sure your brewery has a vision, a philosophy, a point of difference from other people that you can explain to the people drinking your beer, and that you can explain to the people who make your beer with you, who work for you.
Yeah.
So you all understand what the philosophy of the company is, what is its standards, what is its values. And I think that counts for so much in modern society.
I agree. And a big part of your role at Fuller's, and subsequently since leaving Fuller's, has been on the ambassadorial side. And obviously yourself and Symone, out to shot, big shared passion for travel. And recently, I know you've been to South America, you've got Prague coming up. I imagine you've visited a lot of great breweries, a lot of great tap rooms during those visits as well.
Well, I think that it goes back to my original point. What did I find out about Wilson's? And it was the friendships, and those exist to this day. And again, when you go overseas, I always try and do something beery while we're out, and visit a brewery, visit a bar, do things like that. And you make friends, and you make acquaintances, and you know people. And so many people I've been introduced to for the first time while we've been on holiday, meeting people and seeing how they're making beer. It is an influence on me and how I give advice to people, talk to people about making beer. But more than that, it's just friendships. You know, it's nice meeting people who have similar tastes to you, similar. You know, they do the same job, but they do it slightly differently. It's nice having that companion. And brewing is so friendly.
Yeah.
So I think I could walk into any brewery in the world and say, look, I used to be the head brewer of Fuller's. Can I come in and have a look? And they would take me in and show me something. Yeah. You know,
apart from that one in the States.
Which one was that?
The ESB, the one that they did ESB and they...
that was Red Hook.
Hook.
Yeah.
Naughty.
Right, yeah.
Well,
that's right. But they were so... there was such a difference between the tap room and the brewers in
of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
And... Prague coming up next then, so have you been before?
I've been several times to Prague, mainly on business, Symone's never been to Prague, and that's one of the reasons we're going. But it's a beautiful city. Architecturally, it's a beautiful city. It's a stunning city to go. And then they've got great beer as well. So, I'm looking forward to doing it. I've had a few recommendations on Twitter, which is good.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey John Bell sent me some through. I'm not going to do every one because
you need a year.
It's a holiday as well,
and
I want to go and see some of the sites and do something as well. And one of the things I want to do is go to Dresden for a day.
Fantastic.
See if I can get a train over to there. But there's plenty of things to do.
Well, in the UK, we're so blessed, aren't we? We obviously make our own great beer. But, Germany, Czech Republic, Spain, Belgium on our doorstep. So never too far away from a great beer.
Yeah, but the influence of British beer, you could say the similar something to Belgian beer, but British beer has cask beer, which nobody else really does, and it has a setup to do cask beer, and yet we're in danger of losing it. It's now down to under 5% of the total beer sales. About 8.5% of the total draft beer sales. Why? Well, I think it's down to margin. I don't think there's much margin in cask beer. So managers of pubs are not interested in selling it because they don't make enough money. Breweries don't make enough money out of it. So I just think there's a whole problem there. And for my mind, it needs government intervention to solve it as a problem. Otherwise, the beer of Britain will disappear. In fact, there's so many pubs now that don't serve it.
No. Do you feel that that's also part of the issue? Is it's tough to get great staff in hospitality at the moment, and it's a lot of time, effort, and resources into training people into how to look after cask and how to serve cask as well.
You see that. Why would you, something with the lowest margin on the bar, why do you need to invest so much time and effort into it? And then people look at that and say, well, we don't. We simply don't serve it. And that's the problem. You do have to put some effort into it.
Yeah.
And people are not willing to do that because they put their effort into the areas of the hospitality that make money. So if you're making more money on food or soft drinks, you're going to be worried about them. You're not going to be worried about cask beer.
Well, we're enjoying two great beers here. Yeah. Red Fox and, of course, London Pride. And we're in a fantastic pub, the Red Lion here in Barnes, beautifully run by Claire and Angus. I mean, your pub lunch Twitter account is famous, and you're an authority when it comes to that. For you, what makes a great pub, and also what makes a great pub lunch?
Well, I think, it's people. It's a people. Whether you're working in the brewing side or the retail side, it's a people business. And Angus and Claire are classic examples of somebody who wants to run a good pub, listens to what their customers want, and gives it to them. This pub has great food, because the people in this area want a pub that serves great food. Angus was master cellarman so many times when I used to run the competition at Fuller's that we had to take him out of that competition and make him a judge to stop him winning, because he would do anything to win master cellarman. He would spend hour after hour in his cellars looking after the beer. And when you've got somebody like that, you're going to get some good food, you're going to get good beer, so you can trust them, and you're going to get a warm welcome, and whatever, and that's what makes a great pub. And when you go to, for a pub lunch, you do want to have a good pint and you do want to have good food, but you want to be in an environment that you enjoy as well.
And here we are.
Thank
you, John. It's been a pleasure. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yes. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to John Keeling today for his time. See you next time.